Guess who's back? Back again. SG's back. Tell a friend. Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Ba-da-da-bum-bum-bum. Well, at least I don't sound like this. Yeah, no. Tina, I didn't say you deserve what you were getting. I said the longer you stay around evil, God can't do his miracles for you. God can't do his miracles for you, Tina, while you have evil around you. I'm not telling you should come here, but you should. Um, no, really, you should. Even if you don't say anything, you need to, yeah, you're becoming toxic without even realizing it. That can happen.
It's, think about it. Would you see this sort of antics a little long get on the internet convention of men begging for money, taking free donations from Lenin?
While they're putting them down. While they're putting them down.
How could you constantly feel like you are a man? Are you really comfortable with your man? Lifelong Legion?
No, he's not. He doesn't know why he got Woody when
Begging for money and having these females support you? You're a little bitch. Yeah. In my book, that's called a bitch. Now,
wow. Fucking Boo Boo is the bomb, man. Boo Boo's badass. Boo Boo is badass. I'm just saying.
claim, you're all up front. That's your personal situation in life. Claim you have peace in your life. Usually there's truth there. You're in this little paradise city where, you're putting yourself in a position to fall out. Come out. You're
I mean, I just have to, every once in a while throw some love light, and the ways of people that are really, they put themselves out there for things that are the right way to be. See, this is how a man thinks. Boohoo effect is a man. That's how a man thinks and a good member of society. The way that other guy talks and thinks and Tiffany thinks, and they're not good, in my opinion.
elevating yourself to be the better person. Everyone else is down there, all these lowly low-lives have. Yeah. Why don't you prove that you work? You have to be working, right? To at least.
And that's another thing that Tiffany M does, and a lot of them, prove. But it's like, you're like, well, prove that I should prove it to you. I don't even know you, these fucking strangers, man. I mean, but this guy, like in Legion, he be putting down everybody and acting all foolish.
Minimum overhead. Since you're so, lofty, way up there, sitting on the lower mountain like Tiffany, prove yourself. Okay? You're going to put yourself in that lofty position. Prove yourself. Let's see some income. No doubt you probably work on the soon.
Yeah, and the air is thinner up there on Laurel Mountain, so they probably might be feeling a little dizzy and stuff. Stupid.
Basic utilities, right? But you are eBay, despite you are, somewhat employed. You're eBay, and that is a little bitch. You're a bum. No matter how you slice it.
Somebody drop my Cash App, please. No, just kidding.
Okay, you're an eBay, a bum. You're not a man. To me, you're
I'm a woman.
A little wet behind the ears. It's an appearance. You're a bum. And Tiffany has
little puppy. Puffy. Pokey puffy.
She provides an answer since you want to be her spokesman. Why is Tiffany still talking to Janet Mitchell? She admitted it. I don't know now. You want
Really? That's interesting.
talk facts? Let's talk some facts. Tiffany can answer that. This is the guy that's written some awful sexually
Mm-hmm.
Didn't comment about her son.
Big
What she
time.
used to. She'll state, oh, there's an old case. These things take time.
Very weird shit.
Really? Really? 5 years is a criminal case?
All that stuff about the Sandy Hook stuff, too. Really weird shit, in my opinion.
5 years? If she can produce that evidence, what a talk back. Yeah, Tiffany puts herself.
Why'd she take down all her videos? Why does somebody not want to get to 1,000 and be monetized? Why? Why? But you need more watch time hours, but I believe Tiffany could get it.
Sponges of her living provider, Jeff, who, let's just say, engages in screws activities. Yep, Tiffany has a.
I think they had her by the balls, like, you know, metaphorically speaking. I think that, yeah, I really do. I think that, yeah.
Eight natural way about it. She uses them as tools to get what she wants. She doesn't work. She sits on her ass and thinks of new ways to pick fights online.
But she might be bound by golden handcuffs. There might be something they're threatening that she holds dear. She might have to do those things. Maybe she doesn't want to. It's just it's theory. It's a theory. It's a thought that it's a possibility that some people could have people, you know, mothers, instead of by the balls, by the heart.
Does she get owned in one corner of the internet, one pocket? She'll go to another, run to another, cause contentions and arguments there because she's miserable in life. Okay. Now, I don't know what your problem is with your middle girl, but you claim that you don't know who she is. You have the slightest clue, and yet you're claiming that she bought a shirt from you. She purchased a shirt.
I never heard anything about a shirt.
Are you kidding me? What did it say? I'm a bum. I'm a cuck. What did the shirt say? Think that much of yourself that you sell t-shirts for
they're gonna say, what's your gig? And stuff like that.
Get a job. Get a real job.
It's gonna be my job.
Partially employed. Get a full-time job.
Like at a t-shirt stand in the mall.
Okay. Now, you have have this natural propensity to this woman. You are. I can imagine. I would want to imagine if your middle girl was standing in front of you.
It's funny.
Probably beat her. But when you spoke to her on a little bit of that live show of yours, you spelling, animal, it make you feel tough to degrade and verbally bash and abuse the woman that you barely know. That's out of your own mouth.
Men drink from beer cans on their, not coffee mugs. I mean, especially when it's like, hey, I'm uncomfortable talking about this particular topic, you know?
But you don't know it. Yet she has purchased the t-shirt. Right. You got a lot of answering to do.
Maybe it says, I hate Legion.
And that bicycle. A lot of answering to do since you put yourself in that lofty position. Okay. You got a long ride ahead of you. Beta male. All right.
Beta male. That's fucking man. Let me just tell you something. That's a fucking man right there. Now I know a lot of people would say, oh, well, they're on a keyboard. Okay? People might want to say that. Right? Bottom line is this. It's smarter that way. Because the people like that make you want to take them by surprise and knock them the fuck out don't need to know what you look like, in my opinion, allegedly. But they're just that ignorant that they're ignorant to their own ignorance. I read that on somebody's video tonight. Something toxicity. I thought it was a great, you know, great thing to say. I know there's some women over on a channel that are insomniacs. Women are more insomniacs. So when you talk to somebody about how you can't sleep because, you know, things go through your head, right? Not necessarily bad thoughts or whatever, but it seems more women turn into night owls, right? Probably because in the animal kingdom, the man would go out. Well, who fucking knows? Who cares? Bottom line is this. He can sleep. You guys can't. Now you have nowhere you can go, but you can. You can walk back in here. You can make up a fake account. You can wait till the next time. You can do whenever it feels right. I didn't say you deserve what you were getting because of God. No, I didn't. I just said that you were becoming, people can become toxic without realizing they're becoming toxic. And they may think it's because they don't have any other choice. They can't, you know, change things now. But you can. You can.
The next one. You got a long ride and you got a lot of answers, so keep that in mind. You judge me all you want for saying naughty words or whatever, but lying like this about a person, that's some bad shit. I don't even know this bitch. This metal fucking dumbass whore. I don't know her. She's doing someone else's bidding for some reason. She's an idiot, complete fucking idiot. And she put out videos against.
I think Tiffany does know who that is. Not in real life, but she's heard of her.
Me for no reason. I never did jack shit there. The last thing that I remember is she bought a Chucky shirt from me. Then suddenly she hates me for some random reason because I felt it was grand. Right? And now she wants to go at Tiff because she's with me. I think this new metal bitch has like.
How is Tiff with you? Doesn't she live with a guy?
Crush on me or something? Because if not, then why the fuck are you meddling in my affairs?
I think that girl's married. Why do you have a soul patch? Hey, the 2000s called. They want their soul patch back. And Errol Flynn called, and he wants his mustache back. And what is that under your chin? Is that like another, like, scalp?
I mean, you made some kind of like.
And you know what? If you turned yourself upside down, you would look like a cyclops. You would. You would look like a cyclops.
Axel troll person, okay? You're like a prostitute basically that your husband like takes you out with other dudes, okay? That's all you are. You're nothing. I would really love to lay into these. I would really love to lay into those two if they're just fucking weeds.
Okay, Cyclops. Who trims your mustache?
That's the shit.
Captain Hook?
I don't have.
Hi, Night
You're
Owl.
friends
Hi,
with Lindsay, so
Cassidy.
I'm gonna start messing with you.
Oh, fuck you, bitch.
Talking himself.
Yes, the move vector. Tracy, aka Piss and Failure. We have a huge, big problem here. Okay? Now you're trying to paint the convenience story that I don't think so. No, I may be guilty of forgiveness and flip-flopping, changing stories. No, that's certain. You, isn't that right, Miss?
He's good, isn't he?
Make up a story, Frank Boo, for bestiality, or Miss, and pose, superimpose my under children, different forest here. Yeah, that's you. That's your history. Okay? Yeah, the one that is so
Hi, Ricky.
that she took on. The identity of that.
Ricky Gervais. Ricky Gervais, everybody. My friend Ricky Gervais. I'm sorry, I threw you under the table and told everybody Ricky Gervais. Well, this is Boohoo Effect right here.
And here's the truth. Okay? You were in good Katie. You stated, and this is going to dissolve your whole theory without Katie. Okay? When you were in good Katie, you stated she made that confession about his childhood on blog
Mm-hmm.
TV. You stated in a live with Katie, you were friends with her, that blog TV was public. And you left it open. You wanted to say how anybody could have written that video, passed it around. Now,
Not what I was told in the beginning. And one time I even saw Katie say whatever. But yeah, no. Katie was on my panel and basically said it herself that I could find it, you know.
to get into one of my laptops, I'm currently logged out of this newer laptop that I purchased in the past. But I'm pretty sure I got that recorded. See that without a claim that pretty good, but friendly.
I could probably find it. I gotta find like my live stream. A mycologist? What's a mycologist?
I've been getting paid $1,000 a month, if not more, just from this app on my phone. And I don't know if you can see this, but it's
72 letters, it goes out of here. I'm done with my chemo. I'm leaving the finalist of my cancer block. Can you yell at me to her? Doo-doo.
Sup YouTubers, your first 5 a year. Okay, look like they're low. Like, I don't know, those people like in the Middle East or something, you know? Or you can only like see their eyes. It's that I make a little video.
This is December 11th, 2020.
And it's a little, you know, like you don't put Christmas trees up when your kids get older and stuff, you know?
Bald.
I put one up for a while. I used to love that because we had nice decorations.
I have a mask on in it, and I'm bald. I'm at the hospital in front of their Christmas tree.
Hallmark one from The Wizard of Oz, you know, the whole motion, lights and everything. It's really nice. But painting one of that was putting them away. Because that's such a tedious job, wrapping them all up and everything, but they're so expensive that you certainly don't want to throw them in the box. But I just want to catch up with everybody, do a quick little video, and just say hello. And just say hello and let everybody know I'm fine. I know people were a little worried. And don't worry about my animals. They can feel the tension and stuff that I get. But sometimes, you know, so I am.
Because people were threatening to take away my animal, saying that I was so upset about how they were treating me, saying I was faking cancer.
Roscoe tends to want to come up and lick the camera when I'm filming, so sometimes I have to just kind of hold him back a little bit. But other than that, we're all
Of
fine.
course, now he just wants to lick peanut butter off my crotch.
And
No, this is from December 11th, 2020.
it's good. And we're gonna go on a little road trip tomorrow and visit my daughter.
They threw a fit. They said they were going to call the cops on me.
And we're thinking about maybe doing like there's this book called Weird Massachusetts, you know, like different spots that are, you know, little strange stories and occurrences behind them. So we're thinking about maybe picking.
Oh, crap out of me about it.
Sup YouTubers, these are screenshots. Okay. Yeah, they did certain things, you know, certain things that would.
It's vacation. Anything can happen.
Over here, I'm just making this video, like, because I don't know if it'll be short and I make it in part, but this is, I don't know, latest to scratch ticket. I want to watch. Anyway,
December 18th,
they
2020.
wanted to make a video between something that I myself have been, you know, I've had to experience myself. I don't like to use the word victim because I don't think you're a victim until you label yourself that thing. And that's the victim. That victim label is definitely something that the people who victimize you want you to use. So I don't need that. So I didn't quite know how to address it. Didn't want it to be a video where it's specifically targeted at the event, but the particular event that I witnessed is what told me you have to understand the psychology behind what I was, because I can't quite wrap my head around it without being informed. I have to know what makes people and hopefully you guys are interested in it.
Hi,
So,
Paranormal.
I probably will have to do the video in parts because I'm gonna need to cross over from when trolling.
This is when I was like I really couldn't wrap my head around, like I was just diagnosed with stage 3 in October 8th, 2020. Then all this shit kept going down, and all of that time is like holiday times. I was just so overwhelmed that I needed to try to understand the psychology behind the whole cyber predator thing like that. Well, you gotta be okay.
Internet trolling becomes cyberbullying because there is a point where it becomes cyberbullying. From studies that are shown, some trolls will go around, and usually trolls are antisocial. Okay, and they the internet has provided them with anonymity. So, but they did a study where they took some people because they wanted to know if regular people, just everybody, could if it had something to do with the mind or if they actively were a troll. What they found was their first thing was that they wanted to make them in a good mood or a bad mood. So, they did certain things, certain things that would make part of them mad and part of them not be harmful or anything. Just I think it was like they had to take a test, and one group they said they were doing bad, they did questions, harder ones, and the other group had easier questions, they told them they were doing good. So now they put each separate group in, bad or good moods. And then they had them go into certain like
Okay, so I decided that I'm gonna read. Okay? Is that okay? Moses Mendelssohn, the grandfather of the well-known German composer, was far from being handsome. Along with a rather short stature, he had a grotesque hunchback. One day, he visited a merchant in Hamburg who had a lovely daughter named Frumja. Moses fell hopelessly in love with her, but Frumja was repulsed by his misshapen appearance. When it came time for him to leave, Moses gathered his courage and climbed the stairs to her room to take one last opportunity to speak to her. She was a vision of heavenly beauty, but caused him deep sadness by her refusal to look at him. After several attempts at conversation, Moses shyly asked, "Do you believe in marriages? Do you believe marriages are made in heaven?" "Yes," she answered, still looking at the floor. "And do you?" "Yes, I do," he replied. "You see, in heaven, at the birth of each boy, the Lord announces which girl he would marry. When I was born, my future bride was pointed out to me. Then the Lord added, 'But your wife will be humpbacked.' Right then and there I called out, 'Oh Lord, a humpbacked woman would be a tragedy. Please, Lord, give me the hump and let her be beautiful.' Then Frumji looked into his eyes and was stirred by some deep memory. She reached out and gave Mendelssohn her hand and later became his devoted wife." Lee Shapiro is a retired judge. He is also one of the most genuinely loving people we know. At one point in his career, Lee realized that love is the greatest power there is. As a result, Lee became a hugger. He began offering everybody a hug. His colleagues dubbed him the hugging judge. High secret society, as opposed to the hanging judge, we suppose. The bumper sticker on his car reads, "Don't bug me, hug me." About 6 years ago, Lee created what he calls his Hugger Kit. On the outside, it reads, "A heart for a hug." The inside contains 30 little red embroidered hearts with stickums on the back. Lee will take out his Hugger Kit, go around to people, and offer them a little red heart in exchange for a hug. Lee has become so well known for this that he is often invited to keynote conferences and conventions where he shares his message of unconditional love. At a conference in San Francisco, the local news media challenged him by saying, "It is easier to give out hugs here in the conference to people who self-elected to be here, but this would never work in the real world." You should have gone right then and there and reported it. "Call me later today and we'll figure it out." I know. Like we did the other thing. We'll figure that out. You've got a you know, a time frame. I don't think you've, how long ago was that? You didn't tell me something happened to your hand. I knew that you were having pain with your hand, but I didn't know it had something to do with a grocery store incident. How long ago was that? I know the state it was in. Just tell me how long ago. Of July? And what exactly slammed on your hand? Mm? Yeah, you have to call me. Tell me what you did, what happened. All right, remember I was just reading about the hugging judge? So at a conference in San Francisco, the local news media challenged him by saying it is easier to give out hugs here in the conference to people who self-selected to be here. But this would never work in the real world. They challenged Lee to give away some hugs on the streets of San Francisco. Followed by a television crew from the local news station, Lee went out onto the street. First, he approached a woman walking by. Hi, I'm Lee Shapiro, the hugging judge. I'm giving out these hearts in exchange for a hug. Sure, she replied. Too easy, challenged the local commentator. Lee looked around. He saw a meter maid who was being given a hard time by the owner of a BMW, to whom she was giving a ticket. He marched up to her, camera crew in tow, and said, You look like you could use a hug. I'm the hugging judge, and I'm offering you one. She accepted. Oh, okay. The television commentator threw down her one final challenge. Look, here comes a bus. San Francisco bus drivers are the toughest, crabbiest, meanest people in the whole town. Let's see you get him to hug you. Lee took the challenge. As the bus pulled up to the curb, Lee said, Hi, I'm Lee Shapiro, the hugging judge. This has got to be one of the most stressful jobs in the whole world. I'm offering hugs to people today to lighten the load. A little. Would you like whatever? The 230-pound bus driver got out of the seat, stepped down, and said, "Why not?" Lee hugged him, gave him a heart. "Yeah, I know what you mean." And waved goodbye as the bus pulled out. The TV crew was speechless. Finally, the commentator said, "I have to admit, I'm very impressed." One day, Lee's friend showed up on his doorstep. Nancy is a professional clown, and was wearing her clown costume. Makeup and all. "Lee, grab a bunch of your hugger kits and let's go out to the home for the disabled." When they arrived at the home, they started giving out balloon hats, hearts, and hugs to the patients. Lee was uncomfortable. He had never before hugged people who were terminally ill, severely retarded, or quadriplegic. It was definitely a stretch, but after a while it became easier, with Nancy and Lee acquiring an entourage of doctors, nurses, and orderlies who followed them from ward to ward. Am I boring you guys reading? I'll finish the story if you guys don't mind. After several hours, they entered the last ward. These were 34 of the worst cases Lee had ever seen in his life. The feeling was so grim, it took his heart away. But out of their commitment to share their love and to make a difference, Nancy and Lee started working their way around the room, followed by the entourage of medical staff, all of whom by now had hearts on their collars and balloon hats on their heads. Finally, Lee came to the last person, Leonard. Leonard was wearing a big white bib, which he was drooling on. Lee looked at Leonard dribbling onto his bib and said, "Let's go, Nancy." "There's no way we can get through to this person." "Hi, Coward." "Thank you, Coward." Nancy replied, "Come on, Lee. He's a fellow human being too, isn't he?" Then she placed a funny balloon hat on his head. Lee took one of the little red hearts and placed it on Leonard's bib. He took a deep breath, leaned down, and gave Leonard a hug. All of a sudden, Leonard began to squeal. "Ee, ee." You know how it is, right? Some of the other patients in the room began to clang things together. Lou, I'm sorry, not Lou, Lee. Lee turned to the staff for some sort of explanation, only to find that every doctor, nurse, and orderly was crying. Lee asked the head nurse what's going on. Lee will never forget what she said. "This is the first time in 23 years we've ever seen Leonard smile. How simple it is to make a difference in the lives of others." Should I keep going? This one's called Who You Are Makes a Difference. A teacher in New York decided to honor each of her seniors in high school by telling them the difference they each made. She called each student to the front of the class, one at a time. First, she told them how the student made a difference to her and the class. Then she presented each of them with a blue ribbon imprinted with gold letters, which read, Who I Am Makes a Difference. Afterwards, the teacher decided to do a class project to see what kind of impact recognition would have on a community. She gave each of the students 3 more ribbons and instructed them to go out and spread this acknowledgement ceremony. Then they were to follow up on the results, see who honored whom, and report back to the class in about a week. One of the boys in the class went to a junior executive in a nearby company and honored him for helping him with his career planning. He gave him a blue ribbon and put it on his shirt. Then he gave him 2 extra ribbons and said, We're doing a class project on recognition and would like you to I wish I could get like it to move slower. Okay. We're doing a class project on recognition, and we'd like you to go out, find somebody to honor, give them a blue ribbon, then give them the extra blue ribbon so they can acknowledge a third person to keep this acknowledgement ceremony going. Then please report back to me and tell me what happened. Later that day, the junior executive went in to see his boss, who had been noted, by the way, as being kind of a grouchy fellow. He sat his boss down and told him that he deeply admired him for being a creative genius. The boss seemed very surprised. The junior executive asked him if he would accept the gift of the blue ribbon, and would he give him permission to put it on him. His surprised boss said, Well, sure. The junior executive took the blue ribbon and placed it right on his boss's jacket above his heart. As he gave him the last extra ribbon, he said, Would you do me a favor? Would you take this extra ribbon and pass it on by honoring somebody else? The young boy who first gave me the ribbons is doing a project in school, and we want to keep this recognition ceremony going and find out how it affects people. That night, the boss came home to his 14-year-old son and sat him down. He said, The most incredible thing happened to me today. I was in my office, and one of the junior executives came in and told me he admired me and gave me a blue ribbon for being a creative genius. Imagine, he thinks I'm a creative genius. Then he put this blue ribbon that says, Who I Am Makes a Difference on my jacket above my heart. He gave me an extra ribbon and asked me to find somebody else to honor. As I was driving home tonight, I started thinking about whom I would honor with this ribbon, and I thought about you. I want to honor you. My days are really hectic, and when I come home, I don't pay a lot of attention to you. Sometimes I scream at you for not getting good enough grades in school and for your bedroom being a mess. But somehow, tonight, I just wanted to sit here and, well, just let you know that you do make a difference to me. Besides your mother, you are the most important person in my life. You're a great kid, and I love you. The startled boy started to sob, and he couldn't stop crying. His whole body shook. He looked up at his father and said through his tears, I was planning on committing suicide tomorrow, Dad, because I didn't think you loved me. Now I don't need to. Wow. Pretty powerful story right there, huh? You never know what a difference you might make, huh? Just never know. I haven't read any of these before. I'm reading them with you guys, so wow, just like Howard just said, I agree. Imagine that. Remember those little blue ribbons like that, so tiny of a gesture, and wow. This one's called One Day, One at a Time. This is one at a time. A friend of ours was walking down a deserted Mexican beach at sunset. As he walked along, he began to see another man in the distance. As he grew nearer, he noticed that the local native kept leaning down, picking something up and throwing it out onto the water. Time and again, he kept hurling things out into the water. No, they don't. They do not. Thank you, Cassie. As our friend approached even closer, he noticed that the man, see, in my recollection, it was always a little girl. He noticed that the man was picking up starfish that had been washed up on the beach, and one at a time he was throwing them back in the water. Our friend was puzzled. He approached the man and said, Good evening, friend. I was wondering what you are doing. I'm throwing these starfish back into the ocean. You see, it's low tide right now, and all of these starfish have been washed up onto the shore. If I don't throw them back into the sea, they'll die up here from lack of oxygen. I understand, my friend replied, but there must be thousands of starfish on this beach. You can't possibly get to all of them. There are simply too many. And don't you realize that is probably happening on hundreds of beaches all up and down this coast? Can't you see that? You can't possibly make a difference. The local native smiled, bent down, and picked up yet another starfish. And as he threw it back into the sea, he replied, Made a difference to that one. Right? That's what it's got to be. More, you guys, or what? And on a bus that was bumping along a back road in the south, in one seat, a wispy old man sat holding a bunch of fresh flowers. Across the aisle was a young girl whose eyes came back and again to the man's flowers. No, not another one, Cassidy? All right, well, this is real short then. Okay, read. Okay. The time came for the old man to get off. Impulsively, he thrust the flowers into the girl's lap. I can see you love flowers, he explained, And I think my wife would like for you to have them. I'll tell her I gave them to you. The girl accepted the flowers, then watched the old man get off the bus and walk through the gate of the small cemetery. I guess he felt they would be better given to somebody who's alive. A brother like that. A friend of mine named Paul received an automobile from his brother as a Christmas present. On Christmas Eve, when Paul came out of his office, a street person was walking around the shiny new car, admiring it. "Is this your car, mister?" he asked. Paul nodded. "Yeah, my brother gave it to me for Christmas." The boy was astounded. "You mean your brother gave it to you? And it didn't cost you nothing?" Boy, I wish. He hesitated. Of course, Paul knew what he was going to wish for. He was going to wish he had a brother like that. But what the lad said jarred Paul all the way down to his heels. "I wish," the boy went on, "that I could be a brother like that." Paul looked at the boy in astonishment. Then impulsively he added, "Would you like to take a ride in my car?" "Oh, yeah, I'd love that." After a short ride, the boy turned and, with his eyes aglow, said, "Mister, would you mind driving in front of my house?" Paul smiled a little. He thought he knew what the lad wanted. He wanted to show his neighbors that he could ride home in a big automobile. But Paul was wrong again. "Will you stop where those two steps are?" the boy asked. He ran up the steps. Then, in a little while, Paul heard him coming back, but he was not coming fast. He was carrying his crippled brother. He sat him down on the bottom step, then sort of squeezed up against him and pointed to the car. "There she is, buddy, just like I told you upstairs. His brother gave it to him for Christmas, and it didn't cost him a cent. And someday, I'm going to give you one just like it. Then you can see for yourself all the pretty things in the Christmas windows that I've been trying to tell you about." Paul got out and lifted the lad to the front seat of the car. The shining-eyed older brother climbed in beside him, and the three of them began a memorable holiday ride. That Christmas Eve, Paul learned what it meant, what Jesus meant when he said, "It is more blessed to give." Here's one on courage. "So you think I'm courageous?" she asked. "Yes, I do. Perhaps I am, but that's because I've had so many inspiring teachers. I'll tell you about one of them. Many years ago, when I worked as a volunteer at the Stanford Hospital, I got to know a little girl named Liza, who was suffering from a rare and serious disease. Her only chance of recovery appeared to be a blood transfusion from her 5-year-old brother, who had miraculously survived the same disease and had developed the antibodies needed to combat the illness. The doctor explained the situation to her little brother and asked the boy if he would be willing to give his blood to his sister. I saw him hesitate for only a moment before taking a deep breath and saying, "Yes, I'll do it if it will save Liza. Liza. As the transfusion progressed, he lay in bed next to his sister and smiled, as we all did, seeing the color return to her cheeks. Then his face grew pale and his smile faded. He looked up at the doctor and asked with a trembling voice, "Will I start to die right away?" Being young, the boy had misunderstood the doctor. He thought he was going to have to give her all his blood. Yes, I've learned courage, she added, because I've had inspiring teachers. So the little boy was like ready to die for the sister. Chicken soup for the soul. Yeah, but he didn't die though. Um, okay, you want more? Yay, yay, yeah, okay, rating on it. When I arrived in the city to present a seminar on tough-minded management, a small group of people took me to dinner to brief me on the people I would talk to the next day. The obvious leader of the group was Big Ed, a large, burly man with a deep, rumbling voice. At dinner, he informed me that he was a troubleshooter for a huge. Oh, what the fuck? Damn it. You know what? I plugged it in and then didn't plug it in. Hold on. What story? Oh, the one of the girl and the little boy? Okay, here we go. At dinner, he informed me that he was a troubleshooter for a huge international organization. His job was to go into certain divisions or subsidiaries to terminate the employment of the executive in charge. Joe, he said, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow because all the guys need to listen to a tough guy like you. They're going to find out that my style is the right one. He grinned and winked. I smiled. I knew the next day was going to be different from what he was anticipating. The next day, he sat impassively all through the seminar and left at the end without saying anything to me. 3 years later, I returned to that city to present another management seminar to approximately the same group. Big Ed was there again. At about 10 o'clock, he suddenly stood up and asked loudly, Joe, can I say something to these people? I grinned and said, sure. When anybody is as big as you are, Ed, he can say anything he wants. Ed went on to say, all of you guys know me, and some of you know what's happened to me. I want to share, however, with all of you. Joe, I think you'll appreciate it by the time I've finished. When I heard you suggest that each of us, in order to become really tough-minded, needed to learn to tell those closest to us that we really love them, I thought it was a bunch of sentimental garbage. I wondered what in the world that had to do with being tough. You had said toughness is like leather and hardness is like granite, that the tough mind is open, resilient, disciplined, and tenacious. But I couldn't see what love had to do with it. That night, as I sat across the living room from my wife, your words were still bugging me. What kind of courage would it take to tell my wife I loved her? Couldn't anybody do it? You had also said this should be in the daylight and not in the bedroom. I found myself clearing my throat and starting and then stopping. My wife looked up and asked me what I had said, and I answered, no, nothing. Then suddenly, I got up, walked across the room, nervously pushed her newspaper aside, and said, Alice, I love you. For a minute, she looked startled. Then the tears came to her eyes, and she said softly, Ed, I love you too. But this is the first time in 25 years you've said it like that. We talked a while about how love, if there's enough of it, can dissolve all kinds of tensions. And suddenly I decided on the spur of the moment to call my oldest son in New York. We have never really communicated well. We have never really communicated well. Right. When I got him on the phone, I blurted out, Son, you're liable to think I am drunk, but I'm not. I just thought I'd call you and tell you I love you. There was a pause at his end, and I heard him say quietly, Dad, I guess I've known that, but it's sure good to hear. I want you to know I love you too. We had a good chat, and then I called my youngest son in San Francisco. We had been closer. I told him the same thing, and this too led to a real fine talk like we'd never really had. As I lay in bed that night thinking, I realized that all the things you talked about that day, real management nuts and bolts, took on extra meaning, and I could get a handle on how to apply them if I really understood and practiced tough-minded love. So maybe it's not about tough love. It's tough to love someone when the road is hard going, right? I began to read books on the subject. Sure enough, Joe, a lot of great people had a lot to say, and I began to realize the enormous practicality of applied love in my life, both at home and at work. As some of you guys here know, I really changed the way I work with people. I began to listen more and to really hear. I learned what it was like to try to get to know people's strengths rather than dwelling on their weaknesses. I began to discover the real pleasure of helping build their confidence. That's important. Maybe the most important thing of all was that I really began to understand. Oops, sorry. That an excellent way to show love and respect for people was to expect them to use their strengths to meet objectives we had worked out together. Joe, this is my way of saying thanks. Incidentally, talk about practical. I'm now executive vice president of the company, and they call me a pivotal leader. Okay, you guys, now listen to this guy. You know, I never agreed with tough love, but maybe that's what it means. Like, it's tough. Love is tough. You're not supposed to be able to cut people off that you love. And if you have love inside of you, you should want to encourage people and, you know, set that example, not to hurt people. I don't understand the joy in that, you know? Another one? This one's called Love in the Cabbie. Kind of like a Sunday morning sermon, right? Well, I was in New York the other day and rode with a friend in a taxi. When we got out, my friend said to the driver, "Thank you for the ride. You did a superb job of driving." The taxi driver was stunned for a second. Then he said, "Are you a wise guy or something?" No, I'm not putting you on. I admire the way you keep cool in heavy traffic." Yeah, the driver said and drove off. Thank you. What was that all about? I asked. "I'm trying to bring love back to New York," he said. "I believe it's the only thing that can save the city." How can one man save New York? It's not one man. I believe I have made that taxi driver's day. Suppose he has 20 fares. He's going to be nice to those 20 fares because someone was nice to him. Those fares in turn, will be kinder to their employees or shopkeepers or waiters or even their own families. Eventually, the goodwill could spread to at least 1,000 people. Now, that isn't bad, is it? But you're depending on that taxi driver to pass your goodwill to others. I'm not depending on it, my friend said. I'm aware that the system isn't foolproof, so I might deal with 10 different people today. If out of 10 I can make 3 happy, then eventually I can indirectly influence the attitudes of 3,000 more. And that would be start thinking globally, starting locally, right? It sounds good on paper, I admitted, but I'm not sure it works in practice. Nothing is lost if it doesn't. It didn't take any of my time to tell that man he was doing a good job. He neither received a larger tip nor a smaller tip. If it fell on deaf ears, so what? Tomorrow there will be another taxi driver, and I can try to make him happy, them happy. You're some kind of a nut, I said. That shows how cynical you've become. I have made a study of this. The thing that seems to be lacking, besides money, of course, for our postal employees, is that no one tells people who work for the post office what a good job they're doing. But they're not doing a good job. They're not doing a good job because they feel no one cares if they do or not. Why shouldn't someone say a kind word to them? We were walking past a structure in the process of being built and past 5 workmen eating their lunch. My friend stopped. That's a magnificent job you men have done. It must be difficult and dangerous work. Must be difficult and dangerous work. The workman eyed my friend suspiciously. When will it be finished? June, a man grunted. Wow, that's really impressive. You must really be proud. We walked away. I said to him, I haven't seen anyone like you since Man of La Mancha. When those men digest my words, they will feel better for it. Somehow the city will benefit from their happiness. But you can't do all this alone. You're just one man. The most important thing is not to get discouraged. Making people in the city become kind again is not an easy job. But if I can enlist other people in my campaign. You just winked at a very plain-looking woman, I said. Yes, I know, he replied. If she's a school teacher, her class will be in for a fantastic day. And it's funny how I think that a lot of adults, people, they know that when somebody says something kind and encouraging or, commends them for doing a good job, that it makes them feel good. I think other people also know that when they repeat, repetitively horrific, hurtful, mean words to people, they must be doing it on purpose. They have to be. Or are they convinced that I have no feeling? That hurt my feelings when BP said that. So that's what she's trying to do. Good job, BP. I guess. If that's what you wanted to do. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. Martin Luther King Jr. Mark was walking home from school one day when he noticed the boy ahead of him had tripped and dropped all of the books he was carrying. Along with 2 sweaters, a baseball bat, a glove, and a small tape recorder. She said, "I don't have feelings." Mark knelt down and helped the boy pick up the scattered articles. Since they were going the same way, he helped to carry part of the burden. As they walked, Mark discovered the boy's name was Bill, that he loved video games, baseball, and history, that he was having a lot of trouble with his other subjects, and that he had just broken up with his girlfriend. They arrived at Bill's home first, and Mark was invited in for a Coke and to watch some television. The afternoon passed pleasantly with a few laughs and some shared small talk. Then Mark went home. They continued to hang out around school, had lunch together once or twice, then both graduated from junior high school. They ended up in the same high school where they had brief contacts over the years. Finally, the long-awaited senior year came. And 3 weeks before graduation, Bill asked Mark if they could talk. Bill reminded him of the days years ago when they had first met. "Do you ever wonder why I was carrying so many things home that day?" asked Bill. "You see, I cleaned out my locker because I didn't want to leave a mess for anyone else. I had stored away some of my mother's sleeping pills, and I was going home to take my own life. But after we spent some time together talking and laughing, I realized that if I had done that, I would have missed that time and so many others that might follow. So you see, Mark, when you picked up my books that day, you did a lot more. You saved my life." Smile at each other. Smile at your wife. Smile at your husband. Smile at your children. Smile at each other. It doesn't matter who it is, and that will help you to grow up in greater love for each other. Mother Teresa. Sorry, excuse me. Remember the book, The Little Prince? Many Americans are familiar with The Little Prince, a wonderful book by Antoine de Saint the something. Antoine de Saint Exupéry or something. This is a whimsical and fabulous book and works as a children's story as well as a thought-provoking adult fable. Far fewer are aware of his other writings, novels, and short stories. Saint Exupéry was a fighter pilot but it seems like their illnesses are overwhelming physically. Illness. He was a fighter pilot. You remember that book, The Little Prince? And it had the little drawings in it and stuff. The guy who wrote it was a fighter pilot who fought against the Nazis and was killed in action. Before World War II, he fought in the Spanish Civil War against the fascists. He wrote a fascinating story based on that experience entitled The Smile. It is this story which I'd like to share with you now. It isn't clear whether or not he meant this to be autobiography or fiction. I choose to believe it is the former. He said that he was captured by the enemy and thrown into a jail cell. He was sure that from the contemptuous looks and rough treatment he received from his jailers, he would be executed the next day. From here, I'll tell you the story as I remember it in my own words. I was sure that I was to be killed. I became terribly nervous and distraught. I fumbled in my pockets to see if there were any cigarettes which had escaped their search. I found one, and because of my shaking hands, I could barely get it to my lips. But I had no matches. They had taken those. I looked through the bars at my jailer. He did not make eye contact with me. After all, one does not make eye contact with a thing, a corpse. I called out to him, "Have you got a light, por favor?" He looked at me, shrugged, and came over to light my cigarette. As he came close and lit the match, his eyes inadvertently locked with mine. At that moment, I smiled. I don't know why I did that. Perhaps it was nervousness. Perhaps it was because when you get very close, one to another, it is very hard not to smile. In any case, I smiled. In that instant, it was though a spark jumped across the gap between our two hearts, our two human souls. I know he didn't want to, but my smile leaped through the bars and generated a smile on his lips too. He lit my cigarette, but stayed near, looking at me directly in the eyes and continuing to smile. I kept smiling at him, now aware of him as a person and not just a jailer. And his looking at me seemed to have a new dimension too. "Do you have kids?" he asked. "Yes. Here, here." I took out my wallet and nervously fumbled for the pictures of my family. He too took out the pictures of his niños and began to talk about his plans and hopes for them. My eyes filled with tears. I said that I feared I'd never see my family again, never have the chance to see them grow up. Tears came to his eyes too. Suddenly, without another word, he unlocked my cell and silently led me out of the jail, quietly and by back routes, out of the town. There, at the edge of the town, he released me, and without another word, he turned back towards the town. My life was saved by a smile. Yes, the smile. The unaffected, unplanned, natural connection between people. I tell this story in my work because I'd like people to consider that underneath all the layers we construct to protect ourselves, our dignity, our titles, our degrees, our status, and our need to be seen in certain ways, underneath all that remains the authentic, essential self. I'm not afraid to call it the soul. I really believe that if that part of you and that part of me could recognize each other, we wouldn't be enemies. We couldn't have hate or envy or fear. I sadly conclude that all those layers which we so carefully construct through our lives distance and insulate us from truly contacting others. Saint Exupéry's story speaks of that magical moment when two souls recognize each other. I've had just a few moments like that. Falling in love is one example. Looking at a baby. Why do we smile when we see a baby? Perhaps it's because we see someone without all the defensive layers. Someone whose smile for us we know to be fully genuine and without guile. And that baby soul inside us smiles wistfully in recognition. Amy Graham. After flying all night from Washington, D.C., I was tired as I arrived at the Mile High Church in Denver to conduct three services and hold a workshop on prosperity consciousness. As I entered the church, Dr. Fred Vock asked me, "Do you know about the Make-A-Wish Foundation?" "Yes," I replied. "Well, Amy Graham has been diagnosed as having terminal leukemia. They gave her 3 days. Her dying wish was to attend your services." I was shocked. I felt a combination of elation, awe, and doubt. I couldn't believe it. I thought kids who were dying would want to go see Disneyland, meet Sylvester Stallone, Mr. T, or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Surely they wouldn't want to spend their final days listening to Mark Victor Hansen. Why would a kid with only a few days to live want to come hear a motivational speaker? Suddenly, my thoughts were interrupted. "Here's Amy," Fox said, as he put her frail hand in mine. Before me stood a 17-year-old girl, wearing a bright red and orange turban to cover her head, which was bald from all of the chemotherapy treatment. Her frail body was bent and weak, she said. "My two goals were to graduate from high school and to attend your sermon. My doctors didn't believe I could do either. They didn't think I'd have enough energy. I got discharged into my parents' care. This is my mom and dad." Tears welled up in my eyes. I was choked up. My equilibrium was being shaken. I was totally moved. I cleared my throat, smiled, and said, "You and your folks are our guests. Thanks for wanting to come." We hugged, dabbed our eyes, and separated. I've attended many healing seminars in the United States, Canada, Malaysia, New Zealand, and Australia. I've watched the best healers at work, and I've studied, researched, listened, pondered, and questioned what worked, why, and how. That Sunday afternoon, I held a seminar that Amy and her parents attended. The audience was packed to overflowing, with over 1,000 attendees eager to learn, grow, and become more fully human. I humbly asked the audience if they wanted to learn a healing process that might serve them for life. From the stage, it appeared that everyone's hand was raised high in the air. They unanimously wanted to learn. I taught the audience how to vigorously rub their hands together, separate them by 2 inches, and feel the healing energy. Has anybody ever done that? Vigorously rub your hands together, separate them by 2 inches, and feel the healing energy. Should I do it? Should we all do it? Oh, that sounds like farts, doesn't it? It's not, though. I can feel it. Then I paired them off with a partner. Well, we don't have that, but maybe somebody does. I mean, if you do, you might want to wake them up and start just with a partner to feel the healing energy emanating from themselves to another. If you need a healing, accept one here and now. The audience was in alignment and it was an ecstatic feeling. I explained that everyone has healing energy and healing potential. 5% of us have it so dramatically pouring forth from our hands that we couldn't make it our profession. Interesting, huh? Isn't that interesting? I said this morning I was introduced to Amy Graham, a 17-year-old whose final wish was to be at this seminar. I want to bring her up here and let you all send healing life force energy towards her. Perhaps we can help. She did not request it. I am just doing this spontaneously because it feels right. The audience chanted, yes, yes, yes. Amy's dad led her up onto the stage. She looked frail from all of the chemotherapy, too much bed rest, and an absolute lack of exercise. The doctors hadn't let her walk for the 2 weeks prior to the seminar. I had the group warm up their hands and send her healing energy. Wow, we should try doing that sometimes. Like, send our healing energy to people. We'll send it to Night Owl, to all of us. But what if we did it? You know what I mean? Like, if people do it, right? And then they visualize, and you, like, Night Owl, put your hands, like, together in front of you, and then visualize. Close your eyes and imagine. No, don't. Just imagine. Like, put them together in front of you, palm to palm. Don't rub them, though. Just if everybody, like, imagines having Night Owl's hands in theirs. You know what I mean? Like, Yeah, something like that. I'm trying to find a certain. They should let people freaking. Let's see, book. Okay, here we go. No, really, you guys want me to read it to you? I will if you want me to. It's only 16 pages. It's Stephen King. It's a Stephen King short story. Well, if you insist. Sooner or later, the question comes up in every medical student's career. How much shock trauma can the patient stand? Different instructors answer the question in different ways. But cut to its base level, the answer is always another question. How badly does the patient want to survive? January 26th. 2 days since the storm washed me up. I paced the island off just this morning, some island. It is 190 paces wide at its thickest point and 267 paces long from tip to tip. So far as I can tell, there is nothing on it to eat. My name is Richard Pine. This is my diary. If I'm found, when, I can destroy this easily enough. There is no shortage of matches and heroin. Plenty of both. Neither of them worth doodly squat here. So, I will write. It will pass time away anyway. If I'm to tell the whole truth, and why not? I sure have the time. I'll have to start by saying I was born Richard Pinzetti in New York's Little Italy. My father was an old world guinea. I wanted to be a surgeon. My father would laugh, call me crazy, tell me to get him another glass of wine. He died of cancer when he was 46. I was glad. I played football in high school. I was the best damn football player my school ever produced. Quarterback. I made all city my last 2 years. I hated football. But if you're a poor wop from the projects and you want to go to college, sports are your only ticket. So I played and I got my athletic scholarship. In college, I only played ball until my grades were good enough to get a full academic scholarship, pre-med. My father died 6 weeks before graduation. Good deal. Do you think I wanted to walk across that stage and get my diploma and look down and see that fat greaseball sitting there? Does a hen want a flag? I got into a fraternity too. It wasn't one of the good ones, not with a name like Pinzetti, but a fraternity all the same. Why am I writing this? It's almost funny. No, I take that back. It is funny. The great Dr. Pine, sitting on a rock in his pajama bottoms and a t-shirt, sitting on an island, almost small enough to spit across, writing his life story. Am I hungry? Never mind. I'll write my goddamn life story if I want to. At least it keeps my mind off my stomach, sort of. I changed my name to Pine before I started Reed School. My mother said I was breaking her heart. What heart? The day after my old man was in the ground, she was out hustling that Jew grocer down at the end of the block. For someone who loved the name so much, she was in one hell of a hurry to change her copy of it to Steinbrenner. Surgery was all I ever wanted, ever since high school. Even then, I was wrapping my hands before every game and soaking them afterwards. If you want to be a surgeon, you have to take care of your hands. Some of the kids used to rag me about it, call me chicken shit. I never fought them. Playing football was risk enough. But there were ways. The one that got on my case the most was Howie Plotsky, a big dumb bohunk with zits all over his face. I had a paper route, and I was selling the numbers along with the papers. I had a little coming in lots of ways. You get to know people. You listen. You make connections. You have to when you're hustling the street. Any asshole knows how to die. The thing to learn is how to survive. You know what I mean? So I paid the biggest kid in school, Ricky Brazzi, $10 to make Howie Plotsky's mouth disappear. Make it disappear, I said. I will pay you $1 for every tooth you bring me. Rico brought me 3 teeth wrapped up in a paper towel. He dislocated 2 of his knuckles doing the job, so you see the kind of trouble I could have gotten into. By the way, everybody, this is what's it called? Soul Survivor. Survivor type. Stephen King. 16 pages. In med school, while the other suckers were running themselves ragged trying to bone up, no pun intended, between waiting tables or selling neckties or buffing floors, I kept the rackets going. Football pools, basketball pools, a little policy. I stayed on good terms with the old neighborhood, and I got through school just fine. I didn't get into pushing until I was doing my residency. I was working in one of the biggest hospitals in New York City. At first, it was just prescription blanks. I'd sell a tablet of 100 blanks to some guy from the neighborhood, and he'd forge the names of 40 or 50 different doctors on them using writing samples I'd also sell him. The guy would turn around and peddle the blanks on the street for $10 or $20 a piece. The speed freaks and the nodders loved it. After a while, I found out just how much of a balls up the hospital drug room was in. Nobody knew what was coming in or going out. There were people lugging the goodies out by the double handfuls. Not me. I was always careful. I never got into trouble until I got careless and unlucky. But I'm going to land on my feet. I always do. Can't write anymore now. My wrist's tired and the pencil's dull. I don't know why I'm bothering anyway. Somebody will probably pick me up soon. This is written in diary form. Remember, he's on an island. Not a good one. January 27th. The boat drifted away last night and sank in about 10 feet of water off the north side of the island. Who gives a rip? The bottom was like Swiss cheese after coming over the reef anyway. I'd already taken off anything that was worth taking. 4 gallons of water, a sewing kit, a first aid kit, this book I'm writing in, which is supposed to be a lifeboat inspection log. That's a laugh. Whoever heard of a lifeboat with no food on it? The last report written here is August 8th, 1970. Oh yeah, and 2 knives, one dull and one fairly sharp, one combination fork and spoon. I'll use them when I eat my supper tonight, roast rock. Well, I did get my pencil sharpened. When I get off this pile of guano battered rock, I'm going to sue the bloody hell out of Paradise Lines Inc. That alone is worth living for, and I am going to live. I'm going to get out of this. Make no mistake about it. I am going to get out of this. Later. When I was making my inventory, I forgot one thing. 2 kilos of pure heroin, worth about 350,000 New York street value. Here, it's worth El Zilcha. Sort of funny, isn't it? Haha. January 28th. Well, I've eaten, if you want to call that eating. There was a gull perched on one of the rocks at the center of the island. The rocks are all jumbled up into kind of a mini mountain there. They're all covered with bird shit, too. I got a chunk of stone that just fitted into my hand and climbed up as close to it as I dared. It just stood there on its rock, watching me with its bright black eyes. I'm surprised that the rumbling of my stomach didn't scare it off. I threw the rock as hard as I could and hit it broadside. It let out a loud squawk and tried to fly away, but I'd broken its right wing. I scrambled up after it and it hopped away. I could see the blood trickling over the white feathers. The son of a bitch led me on a merry chase. Once, on the other side of the central rock pile, I got my foot caught in a hole between 2 rocks and nearly fractured my ankle. It began to tire at last and finally caught it on the east side of the island. It was actually trying to get into the water and paddle away. I caught a handful of its tail feathers and it turned around and pecked at me. Then I had one hand around its feet and I got my other hand on its miserable neck and broke it. The sound gave me great satisfaction. Lunch is served, you know. I carried it back to my camp, but even before I plucked and gutted it, I used iodine to swab the laceration its beak had made. Birds carry all sorts of germs, and the last thing I need now is an infection. The operation on the gull went smoothly. I could not cook it. No vegetation. Absolutely no vegetation or driftwood on the island, and the boat sunk. So I ate it raw. My stomach wanted to regurgitate it immediately. I sympathized, but could not allow it. I counted backward until the nausea passed, and it almost always works. Can you imagine that bird almost breaking my ankle and then pecking me? If I catch another one tomorrow, I'll torture it. I let this one off too easy. Even as I write, I am able to glance down at its severed head on the sand. Its black eyes, even with the death glaze on them, seem to be mocking me. Do gulls have any brains in quantity? Are they edible? This is called Survivor Type. written in diary form. Stephen King short story. Okay. January 29th. No chow today. One gull landed near the top of the rock pile, but flew off before I could get close enough to throw it a forward pass. I've started a beard. Itches like hell. If the gull comes back and I get it, I'm going to cut its eyes out before I kill it. I was one hell of a surgeon, as I believe I may have said. They drummed me out. It's a laugh, really. They all do it, and they're so bloody sanctimonious when someone gets caught at it. Screw you, Jack. I got mine. The second oath of hypocrites and Hippocrates. Hippocrates, what is it? You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean. I had enough socked away from my adventures as an intern and a resident to set myself up in a practice on Park Avenue. A good thing for me, too. I had no rich daddy or established patron, as so many of my colleagues did. By the time my shingle was out, my father was 9 years in his pauper's grave. My mother died the year before my license to practice was revoked. It was a kickback thing. I had a deal going on with half a dozen East Side pharmacies, with 2 drug supply houses, and with at least 20 other doctors. Patients were sent to me, and I sent patients. I performed operations and prescribed the correct post-op drugs. Not all the operations were necessary, but I never performed one against a patient's will. And I never had a patient look down at what was written on the prescription blank and say, I don't want this. Listen, they'd have a hysterectomy in 1965 or a partial thyroid in 1970 and still be taking painkillers 5 or 10 years later if you let them. Sometimes I did. I wasn't the only one, you know. They could afford to have it. And sometimes the patient would have trouble sleeping after minor surgery or trouble getting diet pills or Librium. It could all be arranged. Yeah, if they hadn't gotten it from me, they would have gotten it somewhere else. Then the tax people got to Lowenthal, that sheep. They waved 5 years in his face and he coughed up half a dozen names. One of them was mine. They watched me for a while, and by the time they landed, I was worth a lot more than 5 years. There were a few other deals, including the prescription blanks, which I hadn't given up entirely. It's funny, I didn't really need that stuff anymore, but it was a habit. Hard to give up that extra sugar. Well, I knew some people, I pulled some strings, and I threw a couple of people to the wolves. Nobody I liked, though. Everyone I gave to the feds was a real son of a bitch. Christ, I'm hungry. Should I keep going? You guys still with me? January 30th. No gulls today. Reminds me of the signs you'd see sometimes on the push carts back in the neighborhood. So, no tomatoes today. I walked out into the water up to my waist with a sharp knife in my hand. I stood completely still in that one place with the sun beating down on me for 4 hours. Cool. You good. Thank you. Twice, I thought I was going to faint, but I counted backward until it passed. I didn't see one fish, not one. January 31st. Killed another gull, the same way I did the first. I was too hungry to torture it the way I had been promising myself. I gutted it and ate it, squeezed the tripes, and then ate them too. It's strange how you can feel your vitality surge back. I was beginning to get scared there for a while, lying in the shade of the big central rock pile. I'd think I was hearing voices, my father, my mother, my ex-wife, and worst of all, the big chink who sold me the heroin in Saigon. He had a lisp from a partially cleft palate. Go ahead, his voice came out of nowhere. Go ahead, snort a little. You won't notice how hungry you are then. It's beautiful. But I've never done dope, not even sleeping pills. Lowenthal killed himself. Did I tell you that? That sheep. He hanged himself in what used to be his office. The way I look at it, he did the world a favor. I guess shingle is his medical license, I think. I wanted my shingle back. Some of the people I talked to said it could be done, but it would cost big money. More grease than I'd ever dreamed of. I had 40,000 in a safety deposit box. I decided I'd have to take a chance and try to turn it over, double or triple it. So I went to see Ronnie Hanelli. Ronnie and I played football together in college, and when his kid brother decided on internal med, I helped him get a residency. Ronnie himself was pre-law. How's that for funny? On the block when we were growing up, we called him Ronnie the Enforcer because he umped all the stickball games and ref the hockey. If you didn't like his calls, you had your choice. You could keep your mouth shut or you could eat knuckles. The Puerto Ricans called him Ronnie Wop. All one word like that, Ronnie Wop. Used to tickle him. And that guy went to college and then to law school, and he breezed through his bar exam the first time he took it. And then he set up shop in the old neighborhood, right over the old fishbowl bar. I closed my eyes and I could still see him cruising down the block in that white Continental of his. The biggest fucking loan shark in the city. I knew Ronnie would have something for me. It's dangerous, he said, but you could always take care of yourself. And if you can get the stuff back in, I'll introduce you to a couple of fellows. One of them is a state representative. He gave me two names over there. One of them was the big chink, Henry Lee Sue. The other was a Vietnamese named Salam Nero, a chemist. For a fee, he would test the chink's product. The chink was known to play jokes from time to time. The jokes were plastic bags filled with talcum powder with drain cleaner with cornstarch. Ronnie said that one day, Lee Sue's little jokes, would get him killed. Disclaimer, I'm reading it as it's written. Stephen King wrote this, so if anybody they're gonna say, "I did you hear it? You were seeing blah blah blah," but it's a book, okay? So let's not all get not that anybody is, but whatever. I'll keep going. Survivor Type by Stephen King. I February 1st. There was a plane. It flew right across the island. I tried to climb to the top of the rock pile and wave to it. My foot went into a hole. The same damn hole. It got stuck in the day I killed the first bird. I think. I think I fractured my ankle. Compound fraction. It went like a gunshot. Sorry. The pain was unbelievable. I screamed, lost my balance, pinwheeling my arms like a madman. But I went down, hit my head, and everything went black. I didn't wake up until dusk. I lost some blood where I hit my head. My ankle had swelled up like a tire, and I'd got myself a very nasty sunburn. I think if there had been another hour of sun, it would have blistered. Dragged myself back here and spent last night shivering and crying with frustration. I disinfected my head wound, which is just above the right temporal lobe, and bandaged it as well as I could. Just a superficial scalp wound plus minor concussion, I think, but my ankle, it's a bad break. Involved in 2 places, possibly 3. How will I chase the birds now? It had to be a plane looking for survivors from the Calais. In the dark and the storm, the lifeboat must have carried miles from where it sank. They may not be back this way. God, my ankle hurts so bad. February 2nd. I made a sign on the small white shingle of a beach on the island's south side, where the lifeboat grounded. Took me all day, with pauses to rest in the shade. Even so, I fainted twice. I guess I'd say I've lost 25 pounds, mostly from dehydration. But now, from where I sit, I can see the 4 letters it took me all day to spell out. Dark rocks against the white sand, they say help in characters 4 feet high. Another plane won't miss me, if there is another plane. My foot throbs constantly. There is swelling still and ominous discoloration around the double break. Discoloration seems to have advanced. Binding it tightly with my shirt alleviates the worst of the pain, but it's still bad enough so that I faint rather than sleep. I have begun to think I may have to amputate. February 3rd. Swelling and discoloration worse still. I'll wait until tomorrow. If the operation does become necessary, I believe I can carry it through. I have matches for sterilizing the sharp knife. I have needle and thread from the sewing kit, and my shirt for a bandage. I even have 2 kilos of painkiller, although hardly of the type I used to prescribe. But they would have taken it if they could have gotten it, you bet. Those old blue-haired ladies would have snorted Glade air freshener if they thought it would have gotten them high. Believe it. February 4th. I decided to amputate my foot. No food, 4 days now. If I wait any longer, I run the risk of fainting from combined shock and hunger in the middle of the operation and bleeding to death. And as wretched as I am, I still want to live. I remember what Mockridge used to say in Basic Anatomy. Old Mocky, we used to call him. Sooner or later, he'd say, the question comes up in every medical student's career. How much shock trauma can the patient stand? And he'd whack his pointer at the chart of the human body, hitting the liver, the kidneys, the heart, the spleen, the intestines. Cut to its base level, gentlemen, he'd say. The answer is always another question. How badly does the patient want to survive? I think I can bring it off. I really do. I suppose I'm writing to put off the inevitable, but it did occur to me that I haven't finished the story of how I came to be here. Perhaps I should tie up that loose end in case the operation does go badly. It will only take a few minutes, and I'm sure there will be enough daylight left for the operation. According to my pulsar, it's only 9 past 9 in the morning. I flew to Saigon as a tourist. Does that sound strange? My stomach. It shouldn't. There are still thousands of people who visit there every year in spite of Nixon's war. There are people who go to see car wrecks and cockfights too. My Chinese friend had the merchandise. I took it to Nego, who pronounced it very high grade stuff. He told me that Lee Sue had played one of his jokes 4 months ago, and that his wife had been blown up when she turned on the ignition of her Opel. Since then, there had been no more jokes. I stayed in Saigon for 3 weeks. I had booked passage back to San Francisco on a cruise ship, the Calais. First cabin. Getting on board with the merchandise was no trouble. For a fee, Ngo arranged for 2 customs officials to simply wave me on after running through my suitcases. The merchandise was in an airline flight bag, which they never even looked at it. Getting through U.S. Customs will be much more difficult, Ngo told me. That, however, is your problem. I had no intention of taking the merchandise through U.S. Customs. Ronnie Hanelli had arranged for a skin diver who would do a certain rather tricky job for $3,000. I was to meet him 2 days ago, now that I think of it, in a San Francisco flop house called the St. Regis Hotel. The plan was to put the merchandise in a waterproof can. Attached to the can was a timer and a packet of red dye. Just before we docked, the canister was to be thrown overboard but not by me, of course. I was still looking for a cook or a steward who could use a little extra cash and who was smart enough or stupid enough to keep his mouth closed afterward when the Calais sunk. I don't know how or why. It was storming, but the ship seemed to be handling that well enough. Around 8 o'clock on the evening of the 23rd, there was an explosion somewhere below decks. I was in the lounge at that time, and the Calais began to list almost immediately. To the left. Do they call that port or starboard? People were screaming and running in every direction. Bottles were falling off the back bar and shattering on the floor. A man staggered up from the lower decks. His shirt burned off, his skin barbecued. The loudspeaker started telling people to go to the lifeboat stations they had been assigned during the drill at the beginning of the cruise. The passengers went right on running hither and to. Very few of them had bothered to show up during the lifeboat drill. I not only showed up, I came early. I wanted to be in the front row, you see, so I would have an unobstructed view of everything. I always pay close attention when the matter concerns my own skin. I went down to my stateroom, got the heroin bags, and put one in each of my front pockets. Then I went to Lifeboat Station 8. As I went up the stairwell to the main deck, there were 2 more explosions, and the boat began to list even more severely. Topside, everything was confusion. I saw a screeching woman with a baby in her arms run past me, gaining speed as she sprinted down the slippery, canting deck. She hit the rail with her thighs, flipped outward. I saw her do 2 mid-air somersaults and a part of a third before I lost sight of her. There was a middle-aged man sitting in the center of the shuffleboard court, pulling out his own hair. Another man in cook's whites, horribly burned about his face and hands, was stumbling from place to place and screaming, "Help me! Can't see! Help me! Can't see!" The panic was almost total. It had run from the passengers to the crew like a disease. You must remember that the time elapsed from the first explosion to the actual sinking of the Calais was only about 20 minutes. Some of the lifeboat stations were clogged with screaming passengers, while others were absolutely empty. Mine, on the listing side of the ship, was almost deserted. There was no one there but myself and a sailor with a pimply pallid face. "Let's get this buckety bottom row whore in the water," he said, his eyes rolling crazily in their sockets. "This bloody tub is going straight to the bottom. The lifeboat gear is simple enough to operate," but in his fumbling nervousness, "Okay, night out." I'm on page 8 of 16. You guys still with me? The lifeboat gear is simple enough to operate, but in his fumbling nervousness, he got his side of the block and tackle tangled. The boat dropped 6 feet and then hung up, the bow 2 feet lower than the stem. I don't know. I was coming around to help him when he began to scream. He'd succeeded in untangling the snarl and had gotten his hand caught at the same time. The whizzing rope smoked over his open palm, flaying off skin, and he was jerked over the side. I tossed the rope ladder overboard, hurried down it, and unclipped the lifeboat from the lowering ropes. Then I rowed, something I had occasionally done for pleasure on trips to my friends' summer houses, something I was now doing for my life. I knew that if I didn't get far enough away from the dying Calais before she sank, she would pull me down with her. Just 5 minutes later, she went. I hadn't escaped the suction entirely. I had to row madly just to stay in the same place. She went under very quickly. There were still people clinging to the rail of her bow and screaming. They looked like a bunch of monkeys. The storm worsened. I lost one oar, but managed to keep the other. I spent that whole night in a kind of dream, first bailing, then grabbing the oar and paddling wildly to get the boat's prow into the next bulking wave. Sometime before dawn on the 24th, the waves began to strengthen behind me. The boat rushed forward. It was terrifying, but at the same time exhilarating. Suddenly, most of the planking was ripped out from under my feet, but before the lifeboat could sink, it was dumped on this god-forsaken pile of rock. I don't even know where I am. I have no idea at all. Navigation, not my strong point. But I know what I have to do. This may be my last entry, but somehow I think I'll make it. Haven't I always? And they are really doing marvelous things with prosthetics these days. I could get along with one foot quite nicely. It's time to see if I'm as good as I think I am. Should I keep going, guys? We got 7 more pages left. Completely up to you. It's called Survivor Type, right? Stephen King. February 5th. The pain did it. February 5th. Did it. The pain was the part I was most worried about. I can stand pain, but I thought that in my weakened condition, a combination of hunger and agony might force unconsciousness before I could finish. But the heroin solved that quite nicely. I opened one of the bags. Sniffed 2 healthy pinches from the surface of a flat rock. First, the right nostril, then the left. It was like sniffing up some beautifully numbing ice that spread through the brain from the bottom up. I aspirated the heroin as soon as I finished writing in this diary yesterday. That was at 9:45. The next time I checked my watch, the shadows had moved, leaving me partially in the sun, and the time was 12:41. I had nodded off. I had never dreamed that it could be so beautiful, and I can't understand why I was so scornful before. The pain, the terror, the misery, they all disappear, leaving only a calm euphoria. It was in this state that I operated. There was, indeed, a great deal of pain, most of it in the early part of the operation, but the pain seemed disconnected from me, like somebody else's pain. It bothered me, but it was also quite interesting. Can you understand that? If you've used a strong morphine-based drug yourself, perhaps you can. It does more than dull pain. It induces a state of mind, a serenity. I can understand why people get hooked on it, although hooked seems an awfully strong word. Used most commonly, of course, by those who have never tried it. About halfway through, the pain started to become more a personal thing. Waves of faintness washed over me. I looked longingly at the open bag of white powder, but forced myself to look away. If I went on the knot again, I'd bleed to death as surely as if I'd fainted. I counted backwards from 100 instead. Lots of blood was the most critical factor. Loss of blood was the most critical factor. As a surgeon, I was vitally aware of that. Not a drop could be spilled unnecessarily. If a patient hemorrhages during an operation in a hospital, you can give him blood. I had no such supplies. What was lost, and by the time I had finished, the sand beneath my leg was dark with it, was lost until my own internal factory could resupply. I had no clamps, no hemostats, no surgical thread. I began the operation at exactly 12:45. I finished at 1:50 and immediately dosed myself with heroin. A bigger dose than before. I nodded into a gray, painless world and remained there until nearly 5 o'clock. When I came out of it, the sun was nearing the western horizon, beating a track of gold across the blue Pacific towards me. I've never seen anything so beautiful. All the pain was paid for in that one instant. An hour later, I snorted a bit more, so as to fully enjoy and appreciate the sunset. Shortly after dark, I Wait, haven't I told ya I'd had nothing to eat for 4 days, and that the only help I could look to in the matter of replenishing my sap of vitality was my own body? Above all, haven't I told you over and over that survival is a business of the mind, the superior mind? I won't justify myself by saying you would have done the same thing. First of all, you're probably not a surgeon. Even if you knew the mechanics of amputation, you might have botched the job so badly you would have bled to death anyway. And even if you had lived through the operation and the shock trauma, the thought might never have entered your preconditioned head. Never mind. No one has to know. My last act before leaving the island will be to destroy this book. I was very careful. I washed it thoroughly before I ate it. He ate his foot, you guys, by the way. His foot. February 7th. Pain from the stump has been excruciating from time to time. But I think the deep-seated itch as the healing process begins has been worse. I've been thinking this afternoon of all the patients that have babbled to me that they couldn't stand the horrible, unscratchable itch of mending flesh. And I would smile and tell them they would feel better tomorrow, privately thinking what whiners they were, what jellyfish, what ungrateful babies. Now I understand. Several times I've come close to ripping the shirt bandage off the stump and scratching at it, digging my fingers into the soft, raw flesh, pulling out the rough stitches, letting the blood bleed onto the sand. Anything, anything to be rid of that maddening, horrible itch. At those times, I count backwards from 100 and snort heroin. I have no idea how much I've taken into my system, but I do know that I've been stoned almost continually since the operation. It depresses hunger, you know. I'm hardly aware of being hungry at all. There is a faint, far-away gnawing in my belly, that's all. It could easily be ignored. I can't do that, though. Heroin has no measurable caloric value. I've been testing myself, crawling from place to place, measuring my energy. It's ebbing. Dear God, I hope not, but another operation may be necessary. Later, another plane flew over, too high to do me any good. All I could see was the contrail etching itself across the sky. I waved anyway, waved and screamed at it. When it was gone, I wept. Getting too dark to see now. Food. I've been thinking about all kinds of food. My mother's lasagna, garlic bread, escargot, lobster, prime rib. Thank you, Mr. Kim. Peach Melba, London broil, the huge slice of pound cake, and a scoop of homemade vanilla ice cream they give you for dessert in Mother Crunch on First Avenue. Hot pretzels, baked salmon, baked Alaska, baked ham with pineapple rings, onion dip with potato chips, cold iced tea and long, long sips. French fries make you smack your lips. God, God, God. February 8th. Another gull landed on the rock pile this morning. A huge, fat one. I was sitting in the shade of my rock, what I think of as my camp. My bandaged stump popped up. I began to salivate as soon as the gun landed, just like one of Pavlov's dogs, drooling helplessly, like a baby. Like a baby. I picked up a chunk of stone large enough to fit my hand nicely and began to crawl towards it. Fourth quarter, we're down by 3. Third and long yardage. Pinzetti drops back to pass. Pine. I didn't have much hope. I was sure it would fly off, but I had to try. If I could get it, a bird as plump and as insulated as that one, I could postpone the second operation indefinitely. I crawled towards it, my stump hitting a rock from time to time and sending stars of pain through my whole body, and waited for it to fly off. It didn't. It just strutted back and forth, its meaty breast thrown out like some avian general reviewing troops. Every now and then it would look at me with its small, nasty black eyes, and I would freeze like a stone and count backwards from 100 until it began to pace back and forth again. Every time it flutters its wings, my stomach filled up with ice. I continued to drool. I couldn't help it. I was drooling like a baby. Hi, Mandy. I'm reading a Stephen King short story called Survivor Type. I don't know how long I stalked it. An hour? 2? And the closer I got, the harder my heart pounded, and the tastier that seagull looked. It almost seemed to be teasing me, and I began to believe that as soon as I got in throwing range, it would fly off. My arms and my legs were beginning to tremble. My mouth was dry. The stump was throbbing viciously. I think now that I must have been having withdrawal pains, but so soon. I've been using the stuff less than a week. Never mind. I need it. There's plenty left. Plenty. If I have to take the cure later on when I get back to the States, I'll check into the best clinic in California and do it with a smile. That's not the problem right now, is it? When I did get in range, I didn't want to throw the rock. I became insanely sure I would miss, probably by feet. I had to get closer. So I continued to crawl up the rock pile, my head thrown back, the sweat pouring off my wasted scarecrow body. My teeth had begun to rot. Did I tell you that? If I was a superstitious man, I'd say it was because I ate. We know better, don't we? Better. It's hard for me to read that and then be. I'm almost done with this. Take a little break from it. Take a little break from it. What do you think? I see what you mean, Mr. Kim. I get it. Like play it back or something, I mean. Um, I stopped again. I was much closer to it than I had been to either of the other ghosts. I still couldn't bring myself to commit. I clutched the rock until my fingers ached, and still I couldn't throw it because I knew exactly what it would mean if I missed. I don't care if I use all the merchandise. I'll sue the asses off them. I'll be in clover for the rest of my life. My long, long life. I think I would have crawled right up to it without throwing if it finally hadn't taken wing. I would have crept up and strangled it, but it spread its wings and took off. I screamed at it and reared up on my knees and threw my rock with all my strength, and I hit it. The bird gave a strangling squawk and fell back on the other side of the rock pile. Gibbering and laughing, unmindful now of striking the stump or open wound, I crawled over the top and to the other side. I lost my balance and banged my head. I didn't even notice it, not then, although it has raised a pretty nasty lump. All I could think of was the bird and how I had hit it. Fantastic luck. Even on the wing, I had hit it. It was flopping down towards the beach on the other side. One wing broken, its underbody red with blood. I crawled as fast as I could, but it crawled faster yet. Race of the cripples. Ha ha. I might have gotten it. I was closing the distance except for my hands. I have to take good care of my hands. I may need them again. In spite of my care, the palms were scraped by the time we reached the narrow shingle of the beach, and I'd shattered the face of my pulsar watch against a rough spine of rock. The gull flopped into the water, squawking noisily, and I clutched at it. I got a handful of tail feathers, which came off in my fist. Then I fell in, inhaling water, snorting and choking. I crawled in further. I even tried to swim after it. The bandage came off my stump. I began to go under. I just managed to get back to the beach, shaking with exhaustion, racked with pain, weeping and screaming, cursing the gull. It floated there for a long time, always further and further out. I seem to remember begging it to come back at one point, but when it went out over the reef, I think it was dead. It isn't fair. It took me almost an hour to crawl back around to my camp. I've snorted a large amount of heroin, but even so, I'm bitterly angry at the seagull. If I wasn't going to get it, why did it have to tease me so? Why didn't it just fly off? February 9th. I've amputated my left foot and have bandaged it with my pants. Strange. All through the operation, I was drooling, just like when I saw the seagull, drooling helplessly. But I made myself wait until after dark. I just counted backwards from 100, 20 or 30 times. Then I kept telling myself, cold roast beef, cold roast beef, cold roast beef. Yeah. February 11th. Rain the last 2 days and high winds. I managed to move some rocks from the central pile enough to make a hole I could crawl into. Found one small spider, pinched it between my fingers before I could get away, and ate him up. Very nice, juicy. Thought to myself, that the rocks over me might fall and bury me alive. Didn't care. Spent the whole storm stoned. Maybe it rained 3 days instead of 2, or only 1. But I think it got dark twice. I'd love to not, no pain or itching then. I know I'm going to survive this. It can't be. A person can't go through something like this for nothing. There was a priest at Holy Family when I was a kid, a little lunny guy, and he used to love to talk about hell and mortal sins. He had a real hobby horse on him. You can't get back from a mortal sin. That was his view. I dreamed about him last night. Father Haley in his black bathrobe and his whiskey nose, shaking his finger at me and saying, "Shame on you, Richard Pinzetti. A mortal sin. Damn to hell, buddy. Damn to hell, boy." I laughed at him. If this place isn't hell, what is? And the only mortal sin is giving up. Half the time I'm delirious. The rest of the time my stumps itch, and the dampness makes them ache horribly. But I won't give up. I swear, not for nothing. Not all this for nothing. February 12th. Sun is out again. Beautiful day. I hope they're freezing their asses off in the neighborhood. It's been a good day for me, as good as any day gets on this island. The fever I had while it was storming seems to have dropped. I was weak and shivering when I crawled out of my burrow, but after lying on the hot sand in the sunshine for 2 or 3 hours, I began to feel almost human again. Crawled around to the south side and found several pieces of driftwood cast up by the storms, including several boards from my lifeboat. There was kelp and seaweed on some of the boards, so I ate it. Tasted awful, like eating a vinyl shower curtain. But I felt so much stronger this afternoon. I pulled the wood up as far as I could so it would dry. I've still got a whole tube of waterproof matches. The wood will make a signal fire if somebody comes soon. A cooking fire if not. I'm going to snort up now. February 13th. Found a crab, killed it, and roasted it over a small fire. Tonight I could almost believe in God again. February 14th. I just noticed this morning that the storm washed away most of the rocks in my help sign. But the storm ended 3 days ago. Have I really been that stoned? I'll have to watch it. Cut down the dosage. What if a ship went by while I was nodding? I have to take care of. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. I made the letters again, but it took me most of the day, and now I'm exhausted. Looking for a crab where I found the other, but nothing. Caught my hands on several of the rocks I used for the sign, but disinfected them promptly with iodine in spite of my weariness. Have to take care of my hands, no matter what. February 15th. A gull landed on the tip of the rock pile today. Flew away before I could get in range. I wished it into hell. where it could peck out Father Haley's bloodshot little eyes through eternity. It's almost over. February 17th. Took off my right leg at the knee, but lost a lot of blood. Pain excruciating in spite of heroin. Shock trauma would have killed a lesser man. Let me answer with a question. How badly does the patient want to survive? How badly does the patient want to live? Hands trembling. If they are betraying me, I'm through. They have no right to betray me. No right at all. I've taken care of them all their lives. Pampered them. They better not, or they'll be sorry. At least I'm not hungry. One of the boards from the lifeboat had split down the middle, and one end came to a point. I used that. I was drooling, but I made myself wait. And then I got thinking of barbecues we used to have. That place Will Hammersmith had on Long Island with a barbecue pit big enough to roast a whole pig in it. We'd be sitting on the porch in the dusk with big drinks in our hand, talking about surgical technique or golf scores or something, and the breeze would pick up and the sweet smell of roasting pork over to us. The sweet smell of roasting pork. Sounds like he cooked his leg. Pretty gross if you ask me. He's eating himself, you guys. February question mark. Took the other leg at the knee. Sleepy all day. Doctor, was this operation necessary? Ha ha. Shaking hands like an old man. Hate them. Blood under the fingernails. Scabs. Remember that model in med school with the glass belly? I feel like that. Only I don't want to look. No way, no how. I remember Dom used to say that. Waltz up to you on the street corner in his highway outlaws club jacket. You'd say, Dom, how'd you make out with her? And Dom would say, no way, no how. Shell, Dom. I wish I'd stayed right in the neighborhood. This sucks so bad, Dom would say. But I understand, that with proper therapy and prosthetics, I could be as good as new. I would come back here and tell people this is where it happened. Ha ha ha. Found a dead fish. February 23rd. Found a dead fish. Rotten and stinking. Ate it anyway. Wanted to puke. Wouldn't let myself. I will survive. So lovely stoned the sunsets. February. Don't dare, but have to. But how can I tie off the femoral artery that high up? It's as big as a fucking turnpike up there. But somehow I've marked across the top of my thigh the part that is still meaty. I made the mark with this pencil. I wish I could stop drooling. To all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, pickles, onions on sesame seed bun. Beba looked at my face in the water today. Nothing but a skin-covered skull. Am I insane yet? I must be. I'm a monster now. A freak. Nothing left below the groin, just a freak. A head attached to a torso, dragging itself along the sand by the elbows. A crab, a stone crab. Isn't that what they call themselves, man? Hey, man, I'm just a poor stone crab. Could you spare me a dime? Ha ha ha. They say you are what you eat, and if so, I haven't changed a bit. Dear God, shock trauma, shock trauma. There is no such thing as shock trauma. February 40. Dreaming about my father when he was drunk, he lost all his English. Not that he had anything worth saying anyway. Fucking dipstick. I was so glad to get out of your house, Daddy, you fucking greaseball dipstick nothing cipher Zilcho Zero. I knew I'd made it. I walked away from you. Didn't I? I walked on my hands. But there's nothing left for them to cut off. Yesterday I took my earlobes. Left hand washes the right. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing. 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4. Who cares? This hand or that. Good food, good meat, good God. Let's eat. Lady fingers. They taste just like lady fingers. That was it. After that, he cut off his other hand. And he couldn't write anymore. He ate himself to death. Thank you for sticking through that. But anyway, I hope everybody is going to have a wonderful day today. And, peace out and tacos. You're welcome. Thank you for sticking through it. Good night. Good night. Morning. Whatever.